Have you ever wondered what goes on behind these high, formidable walls of a monastery? What makes a man give up all his worldly possessions and accept the monastic life? Well, keep watching, because you're about to find out. In 1991, I was privileged to be invited to make a film which answered all these questions precisely. As I interviewed the fathers and the brothers and imposed my searching questions, I must say they held nothing back. They were totally honest. So here then is Waiting on God.
You can't understand this life except in terms of a commitment to prayer. The whole life focuses on the Eucharist, which we celebrate every day, and in a sense everything grows out of that. And I suppose this is because it's a way to be a human being in relation to God. It devolves entirely from our understanding of Jesus as the man who is perfectly human and perfectly God. And our way to enter into that is through the gift of prayer. The Eucharist is obviously central because for the whole Church that's the gift of Christ, which binds us all together and draws us into his life. And for us at Mirfield we have 4 offices, as they're called, which are essentially scriptural services. You've got the Eucharist like a seed, and then everything just sprouts from it. The choir offices, the services that we go to 4 times a day, they grow out of the Eucharist. And then for each of us, life is enriched by an increasing dependence on prayer, time spent alone with God. To use the word meditation is to use a kind of umbrella term which covers all kinds of ways in which individual brethren try to spend time with God. And for us in the community, we set aside at least 3 hours a week. There is a quality of peace in the life. To go to London for the day is an exhausting business. It is for most of us. But the noise of a city, the pressures, the strain on people's faces, the anxiety, the worry, this is all so evident. And it is true that we are freed from some of those stresses in order to help hold the stress and pain of people around us. And that's why I think perhaps there is a certain gift of peace here, which you encounter when you come, but which we don't experience because we're trying to hold on to some of the pain and the struggle of other people. It's no good thinking that, oh, they've got some peace and quiet up there, I think I'll go and join them. You'd quickly find it's not that kind of escape route. In the modern world, so many of the sadnesses are because people have forgotten to listen to each other, to listen and to understand. And for us, silence is first and foremost about listening. It's about listening to God, it's about listening to the world, it's about listening to the church, it's about listening to one another. And unless you deliberately make room for silence in which that kind of listening can go on, then again, the whole thing falls apart. And so we deliberately have silence built into our lives. Greater silence is the big silence that we have from Compline until 9 o'clock in the morning, from about 10 o'clock at night. The community of the Resurrection began with a group of men who were all scholars, and so we've always given time to study and to disciplined academic work. We don't have amongst us the great scholars we used to have, but we think it's still important for the community to be a community that reads and thinks. And so every brother would have opportunity for serious theological reading, and we share something of that with each other.
The day is structured so there are quite long chunks of time free for reading. I have an interest in languages, so I tend to follow that up. Other people would follow up a bit of liturgy, or perhaps would just study something particularly for a sermon or a piece of work that they have to do.
People have this wonderful idea that if you go to a real monastery, then they're entirely self-sufficient. It's just not true for us. We do grow a certain proportion of our own vegetables, but not a very great proportion. And we rely, like everybody else in the area, on suppliers.
I'm the custos, which is the custodian of the property. But this year, I decided I was old enough to give up looking after buildings. And so now I look after the gardens and the grounds. I was living in South Africa on a very big farm, and it was pretty lonely. It was mainly meeting one of the brethren of the community, describing his life here and what they did in Burfield. He came to spend a holiday on the farm, and that started me thinking about life differently from the one I was leading there. That basically is what made me come. I'm a member of a family. It means that I have my home here, and I have my work here, and we have the church and the worship, and it's a very structured and ordered life. We all are brothers together, and so hence the community. I think that's why it was called the community of the Resurrection.
The important thing is that we're here to serve one another, because it is the God who calls us to serve each other. And I serve by working in the kitchen, by preparing meals for my brethren. So that really means that I come into the kitchen about 5 o'clock every evening and decide, well, what are we going to have today? The brethren here are very good. They don't complain too much. They're very generous in their compliments. The most enjoyable part about living in the community is, in fact, sitting in choir, saying the psalms or singing the psalms, because here I think we open ourselves to a larger horizon, and for a moment we can let go of our immediate cares and concerns and attend to another reality which is far larger than us. And in attending to this reality, we are sort of refreshed and renewed, and also given eyes to see this reality in all things, so that for a moment we go to church, not just to find God in the church, in the meditation, but also to discover him in what we're doing in our everyday life. But we need them both. Sometimes you want to pack your bags and go just like that, immediately. And it's usually when there's a lot of tension in the community, a lot of argument going on, particularly if you're in conflict with one other brother. And that is very difficult, particularly if the conflict cannot be reconciled or sorted out. Then it becomes very painful, and you wonder what's it all about. But then you have to sort of stick at it. It is extraordinary, though the basic rhythm of our day, prayer and work, is the same, there is a sense of newness about each day, and no 2 days ever seem the same. It is rather like when we say the Psalms in church. We say the Psalms over and over again, and yet I'm constantly struck by, have I really said this psalm before? It strikes me as being new. And so though I come into the kitchen at 5 o'clock, of course there are some days when I think, oh, not again. But for the majority of the days, it does strike one as being new.
I suppose in one way a community is like a little village. It does have to have organisation. I could almost see the superior of the community as a bit like the local mayor in some ways, but we have all kinds of responsibilities that need to be covered.
The superior is the chairman of the chapter. It's the superior's responsibility to see that all brethren have opportunity to voice their opinions on any matter in the chapter, and to try and bring the brethren to a common mind, so that what decisions are made represent the common mind of the community.
We do receive pocket money and also holiday money, and these amounts are quite small. They're not anything like a salary or a stipend, but they do enable us, they're supposed to enable us to have holidays. And if they are not sufficient for us to have holidays, we can ask for more. And they enable us to buy things which are not essential. Anything that is essential, such as our clothes, our shoes, having our haircuts or whatever, we can claim that money back. But for non-essential things which we need, we get this pocket money.
Quite literally, a novice means someone who is new, a new boy, a new man. He's someone who has come to the community to test his vocation. He believes he is called to this way of life, and he is trying to see whether or not it is possible for him to live in community. The novitiate lasts somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. It's a very great privilege being novice guardian in the sense that it is a position of great trust, and the novices that so far I have had within the novitiate do trust me with a great deal of their personal feelings, personal lives. Until a chap becomes professed, they're not given permanent jobs, work to do within the community. They wouldn't hold office within the community. When they're finally professed, they have what's called a seat and vote in chapter. That is, they take their part in the full government of the community. There are two parts to the ceremony. First of all, it is making a vow to God in the presence of the brothers, and it's a vow which links him in covenant with God and with the brethren.
Vocation, calling, is a very personal thing, and for me it has never been a matter of black and white or crystal clear. It has been a feeling that this is perhaps something which I should pursue. So that is what, in fact, I did. My parents were very against the idea from the start. They couldn't understand it. They thought it would be a waste of a life. But I correspond with them regularly. I telephone occasionally, and I think they are gradually coming around round to it that there is more to it than they gave it credit for. Here we follow quite a strict program, and there are very limited hours of recreation. And I've always been a great one for walking in the countryside, and that's something I really miss. But I think it's more than that. It's the loss of the freedom to control one's life or one's income. I've had a number of girlfriends, but nothing really deep or significant. And I just realized, well, perhaps that's something one has to leave behind. That's something one has to give up, sacrifice, in order to live this life.
Again, one of the important things about the life is that it should be balanced. A key word for the whole of the life is rhythm. And it's a whole series of rhythms. There's the rhythm of prayer, there's the rhythm of study, there's the rhythm of work, and there's the rhythm of recreation. There are a few people who go jogging. There are a few brothers who play squash. There are some brothers who go cycling. A couple of brothers who go swimming. But for most of us, we do less energetic things. And a quiet walk may be as much as some people manage.
There are people who wear habits like this, men and women. There are those who don't. There are people who live in a place which is like a monastery, such as here at Mirfield. There are those who don't, who might live in a flat or might live in a back street somewhere and do a teaching job or something like that. It starts in the New Testament, where people gave up their whole life and all the possessions to follow Jesus. In the book of the Acts of the Apostles, we read that the Christians in Jerusalem had all their possessions in common and lived life together of prayer and service of the poor. And between then and now, I suppose it's followed quite a checkered course, the community, as it's tried to kind of sniff out what God wants of it. So we had these two founders, Charles Gore, who was particularly interested in social issues, the big questions of the day in society. On the other hand, Walter Freer, who was more of a scholar, liturgist, and a monk. So there's those two things in our spirit. He and Walter Freer, in 1892, made vows of profession in the chapel of Pusey House in Oxford. And that's when it started. They came here to Mirfield, which is about 10 miles south of Leeds, in 1898. People tend to think of a religious order as being run like the army. You jump into action at the snap of a finger when someone tells you to do something. In fact, it isn't like that. It's more like a family. It's a life of listening to each other, of hard listening. That is what the word obedience really means. We all listen to each other. So if we decide something that I don't like, something we've got to do, well, you do it because that's what we've agreed. And then at some opportunity in the future, I may have a chance to raise it again. But far more important than doing what we like or what we want is the business of belonging together. And that belonging together is arrived at through listening to each other and being able to arrive at common decisions and staying loyal to them. First of all, it is a quest for God. Well, that's an extremely demanding quest. They tell us in the Old Testament that you have to watch it when you do that because you can get burnt up. The quest for God is demanding, exhausting, and will only bring about a tremendous revolution in you as a person. It's therefore something not to be undertaken lightly at all, and in no way can that be seen as an escape. Secondly, in the monastic life, you're faced with yourself. You can't run away from that any longer. Thirdly, living in community is hardly an escape. People sometimes say that it's all right for monks, they can live in this place where everything is provided, got no worries, easy life. Whereas, if they thought about it for a minute, they'd realise that it can't be so. Someone's got to do the washing up for 40 people, the cooking, the laundry, the looking after guests, all the other things. But also, we've all got to live with other people. We know what that's like in the family. Well, you imagine that multiplied 10 or 20 times. People are awkward, they're cussed, they're irritating, they refuse to change, and when you join a monastery, you don't turn into angels overnight. It's a lifetime's process of transformation, of conversion. Therefore, to live in community is very difficult. And you stay there because of the fruits, because it simply bears fruit. We have a saying, well, we have various sayings in our community when we joke about these things. Of course, we say it jokingly, but there's a grain of truth in it. One is that if any member of our community here at Murfield were murdered, the police would have a terrible job trying to find the murderer because they'd find that everybody had a motive.
Almost every day, one or other of us or more has somebody coming for advice, confession, counselling, or just somebody who they can talk to or who will listen.
The community has been in South Africa since 1903, living the same kind of life as Moorfield. And though we no longer run schools, colleges and parishes, we do concentrate on living the life together and serving the local church in many different ways. South Africa continues to be a very important part of our life. Indeed, it's always been part of the community's role to help the parish priest in the field.
Being a new parish, we decided that when we got ourselves organised, it would be good to have a mission to ourselves to deepen our faith and also to encourage us to reach out to other people with the gospel message. So the Church Council discussed how we would do this, and the main suggestion was that it would be nice to have a Murfield mission. All we had to pay initially was the expenses of the lay brother who was to be the director of the mission. And he came for the first 6 months, visiting us once a month, preaching at the service and arranging house groups in preparation for the mission. And then duly the team arrived in the June. They stayed a whole week, and we had a variety of activities from children's holiday clubs, visiting every house in the parish, mission services at night, and then culminating with the great mission service on the final Sunday evening. The special gifts that they had was the love and the friendship and their deep commitment to our Lord, and the fact that they could in a very simple way explain the faith. And that was the motto of our mission, was faith and friendship, deepening our faith and reaching out in friendship to all those who will live within our boundaries.
Learned to see muskrats.
And then, of course, there's the college, which is devoted to the training of men for the priesthood.
It's a matter of putting oneself.
At the end of 2 years or 3 years, the student should be appropriate for ordination. And we reckon that the marks of being ready for ordination are maturity, that there's something of holiness, of the dedication, the responsibility towards God, of wisdom, that is not just book learning, but having a perceptive and imaginative grasp of the Christian tradition, and pastoral competence, that he won't be destructive in his relationships with parishioners.
We see ourselves as a family, and once people come, we want them to stay in the community, to be nursed in the community through their old age, and if possible to die here. When a person is dying, we try to make sure that somebody's with them all the time, and this can go on for several days. When he as soon as we realise he is dying, we anoint him, say the last prayers with him, and when he's died, we then let the rest of the community know, and quite often some brethren will come to say a prayer with the body. I used to go and look at that graveyard and think what a cold and wet place it's going to be for an awful long time. But now when I go and look at it, I think of the brethren I've known who are there, and there is more a sense of going to join them.
We're looking for the will of God, for what he wants us to be and to do.
The important thing is that we're here to serve one another, because it is the God who calls us to serve.
The real gift of the life is the sense of doing what you were made for.